Okay, we're live.
Yes,
Hi,
we are.
everybody. It's Dale Walsh, host of Straight, Sane and Sober. It's host of Straight, Sane and Sober, and welcome to our show for the week. Uh, can you hear us, Guy?
I can hear you just fine, Dale.
I think we're having some technical. Um, there we go. Hopefully, we're having. It seems we're having some technical difficulties, but are you there, Guy?
I am here, Dale. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, your picture seems to be frozen, but I can hear you fine. So now it seems your picture is good. So welcome everybody. This is Dale Walsh from Straight, Sane and Sober, and welcome to Mental Health Warrior TV for this Tuesday, March 29th, 2022. And thank you for joining us. Today our guest is Guy Brilando, and we'll be right back as soon as I do the intro. So just hold on and hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. We have a great show this week. It's with Guy Brilando, who's uh, a retired fighter pilot. He flew F-16s for 3,600 hours and over a 20-year career. He had 200 combat hours, and actually, this is National Vietnam Veterans Day, I think. So that's why we wanted you on today, Guy, because we wanted a feeling of the military. And not only are you a F-16 pilot, but you're also a retired commercial pilot for Southeast Airlines. Southeast or
Southwest
Southwest?
Airlines, but yes.
And an author. His book is "Discovering Your Authentic Truth," which is we'll be discussing. And he's also like a major neuro linguistic programming counselor, and he has a very impressive resume. And we'll get to him as soon as I start the show, as I do always with the poems. So
All
this
right.
poem is called "Quantum Leap Life is Making." Quantum leap life is making. These are the times transforming entire Earth, when every person finds their true worth, and the old paradigms are due to fall, even as powers that be try to stall the great tsunami threatening to drown all creatures who are unwilling to change, to transformation that's going down because realities become very strange. And there's no way to say what will transpire, for now is the era of deep mystery, unprecedented in our history, when mankind tries then to one to conspire, since life as we know it will meet its doom, but I'll let it pass in my sacred room.
Oh, it's
So
wonderful.
welcome, Guy.
Thank you,
Thank
Dale.
you.
That was wonderful. What
I,
a way to start out the program.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's always nice to have my poetry appreciated. But as you can see, I'm the Poetic Warrior, and I've been a warrior for about 6 months now. And we actually just last week I interviewed our newest warrior, who's the second North American warrior. Uh, so Guy, it's a real pleasure to have you on. You're so accomplished, and your resume is so impressive. Uh, why why don't you just start telling us a little bit about yourself? And I know you have myriad interests, but why don't you just sum it up for us a little bit?
All right, Dale. Well, thank you very much. And again, To all your listeners out there, it's always an honor and privilege to be able to come on one of your shows and to be able to share a little bit. Maybe it will land in somebody's world and they'll hear something that they've been needing to hear, or, maybe it's not that something they've been needing to hear, but it just hits them in the right way. But I grew up in Chicago, Illinois area. I went through high school really not knowing what I wanted to do when I grew up. And then I eventually went on to college there in Chicago. And then I went down for 3 years, and then I moved down to Florida, and I finished up my degree down there another 3 years. But while I was in Florida, Dale, that's where I fell into the military. I joined an ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, detachment there in Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University was the name of the university. And I just fell in love with it and finally found my calling. I have been searching for a long time. What is going to satisfy Guy Brilando, right? How am I going to find my home? And I found it in the military and absolutely fell in love with it. I excelled in the program. I became the cadet commander for, at that time, was the largest all-volunteer squad or detachment in the entire country. I was rewarded with a F-16 fighter or pilot training at Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training, which is the premier fighter training for all the Euro-NATO countries, including the U.S. And from there, I got an F-16, and then I went on through F-16 training.
I'm sorry, Guy, you're going in and out. Do you think that you can move closer to the mic or do something with your camera or something? Because
I don't know. I can do this.
Oh, that's better.
I can do this, Dale. Can you hear me okay now?
That's much better, yes.
Okay. So
That's
I
much
went,
better.
so after the F-16 training in Florida, then I went to Korea. I lived in Korea for 1.5 years. And then I moved to Germany, was there for 3.5 years. That's where I met and married my wife. We've been together 31 years. And then I went on to Italy. I was there for a little over 3 years. And then I went over to Phoenix, Arizona. After 8 years of being overseas, I finally made it back to the States. And we were there for 23 years. Now I live up here in Keystone, Colorado, where we have a snowstorm going on right now. So that's kind of the where I've lived kind of thing, a little bit about the military. Along the ways, as you mentioned, I wrote a best-selling book called Discovering Your Authentic Truth. And I've also been involved as a professional network marketer for over 20 years as well, building businesses, building teams, team building, and just helping people make money.
Well, that's very impressive. And recently I joined, it's not a multi-level marketing situation, but similar. It's a hybrid of all sorts of like things, but it's a financial planning company. And we basically have a network marketing structure where everybody is building their own business within the company. And is that what you're doing with your network marketing, or is it more a hierarchy?
Yeah, it's network marketing, the MLM. The industry's been around since the very early 60s, late 50s. I've been involved in the industry in various ways for over 20 years. So I'm very well versed of what the industry is all about. And the company we're with right now are actually friends of mine that started the company, and they've been very, very successful in the network marketing regime, not only themselves making millions of dollars, but also helping other people make millions of dollars. So I just love it. I love it because you're helping people, and you're helping people that in general wouldn't have a way out of getting themselves out of debt, out of creating true financial wealth for themselves, because they just don't have that kind of education. But with this, when working as a team, we can help work with them to teach them those skills so that they can be successful as well.
Well, that's very admirable, and I love your dedication to service, and to helping other people. I think that's why I got into my financial planning companies, because the financial rewards are great, but I really wanted to do something of service, and it gave me the chance to do that. We provide free financial planning and education to all our clients. So, but I think that's also why I started my coaching business for the families of schizophrenics. Is just after I've been through so much, I felt that it was time to really try to give back to the community with my knowledge and with my insight to help people. I call them the forgotten victims of mental illness, the families of schizophrenics.
Oh, I can't imagine. I mean, for you, Dale, what's been the greatest awakening in your journey for you?
Well, is the motto of my company, which is recovery is always an option. Uh, basically, when I got sick in 1975, there was like this perception that once you got a mental illness, you were always like consigned to being basically a coping person, and you couldn't thrive. And I feel that I've really like been able to flourish because despite my illness.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
But I wanted to ask one thing I saw in your bio that was very fascinating because I rode Schwinn bikes when I was a kid. Was
Oh, did you?
your father was an Olympic cyclist, and you said he designed most of the bikes for Schwinn uh, after his Olympic career was over.
That's correct. He was in 48, 52 Olympics. He would have been in the 44 Olympics as well, but he got drafted into the war, so
Right.
he missed that one. But he was 48 and 52, and then after that, he got hired on with Schwinn as a chief or as an engineer, and he eventually rose to the level of chief engineer in charge of the whole engineering department, and then eventually on to executive vice president with the company. So yeah, he's very well renowned in the bicycle world. He was like one of the foremost engineers in bicycles. He brought a lot to the bicycle world, to include the derailleur. That was my dad's design. The Stingray was a big part of my dad's design. The Latour collegiates, all those 10-speed bicycles. That was all my dad.
Well, I loved my Schwinn when I was growing up. It was like one of my prized possessions. So I appreciate your father for designing so many bikes because I'm sure I can't remember what model I rode, but I'm sure it was probably designed by him. And Schwinn's were just like the cat's meow when I was growing up. It was like the Cadillac of bike.
Right. Yep, that's absolutely true.
So you were in the Air Force for 20 years, Guy, or you did a full term?
Yes. Yep, it's 20 years, a little over 6 months. So, yeah, I got my retirement right off the bat as soon as I quit. So that was good.
Right. So just exploring a little bit. What would you say was like one or two of your most memorial moments as a fighter pilot of F-16s?
Wow, that's a great question, Dale. I, I've I think the flying is just really hard to describe to somebody. Ones that stick out is obviously I ejected, so that one sticks out quite a bit. I don't know if that's memorable, but it is definitely one event that sticks
Right.
out. Another one was in another emergency that I had that sticks out. But I think just the overall experience, it's really hard to try to encompass into one or two events because it is such a fluid operation. I really enjoyed the intensity of the environment, having to think on your feet, having so many fields of input coming in at once that you have to decipher which is the most important and then act upon that. And I think that's what I loved about it the most, truly.
Well, you were in the Air Force during 9/11, right?
Yes, I was. I was at Luke. I was at Phoenix, Arizona. We were a training base there. So, but yeah, I mean, I remember that morning very, very well.
I was just wondering what was the basic mindset of the military when that happened. I mean, obviously, it like totally
What's
changed.
coming next?
Right.
What's coming next? Because we had no idea what was going to be the next attack. And we had in Arizona there, we knew we have, or I don't know if we still do, I won't say that, but I know at that time we had a lot of terrorists living within Phoenix, Arizona. And at that time, it was all classified, of course, but we were very concerned that that wasn't just the end of the attacks, right? Nobody knew. I mean, now it's very easy to understand that that was the whole attack, but we didn't know if there was more coming. We have right outside of Phoenix, Arizona, is one of the largest nuke plants in all the United States. And so we were afraid that that thing was going to be attacked somehow. Plus, we're the fifth largest city in the United States. So there was a lot of concern what was coming next. Thankfully, nothing else did.
Right. Well, I've just always been fascinated by like the military mindset, and I have a lot of friends who are veterans and stuff, including some Vietnam veterans. And I mean, one of my best friends was in Vietnam. He was in Saigon mostly, but he was like a payroll master, and so I say he's the man who financed Vietnam. So, but I just so you got out of the military in what year? 2007?
Yes, 2007. Yep.
And then you became a commercial pilot, right? Were there any memories that you have of being a commercial pilot that really?
Well, it was quite a transition, I will say that, because you go from a single seat, single engine fighter into a multi-engine airplane with two pilots up front. So now you got to learn how to communicate, get along with the guy that you're sitting next to for all those hours. In a squadron for the fighter world, we're all a tight unit of 30, 40 guys at the most, right? And gals now. But, back then about 30, 35 guys, and you're extremely tight. You know everybody. You hang out with them on a regular basis, so you know their personalities really well. But in the commercial world, every time you go out to fly, you're flying with somebody new that you don't know, or most of the time. And so you got to get to know the person, and the crew coordination is really important because you got to have everybody speaking on the same sheet of music, if you will. When you get into my book, one of the things I talk about is that we each have our own individual map of the world. No two people see the world the same way. And so when you take those two different worlds and you put them in a cockpit, that one person may see and hear something, the other person hears and sees something else, and then they interpret it completely different. And so that communication between the two people in the cockpit is really important. And that was all new to me. I never had to deal with that other than when I was learning to fly. So that was a huge transition, that part of it. And then just the type of flying, you go from driving a Formula One race car to driving a bus, would be the simplest analogy, so that was a little bit different too. But what I enjoyed the most from the commercial airline was just getting out and seeing all these different cities in our own country, because I had lived overseas for 8 years, and even though I had moved to different states by that point, but it was still just really neat to get into these different cities. I'm a foodie. I love restaurants. I love trying out new food. So I got my fill of doing that over the years. And then and the camaraderie there at Southwest was it was a good working environment. So I really enjoyed it.
What I sort of skipped over this, but you said that one of your most memorable moments as a fighter pilot was ejecting. So what was that all about?
Yeah, again, we have one engine in the F-16, and we're all by ourselves, so a single engine and single seat. And we were in a major exercise, and we were flying at low altitude, about 500 feet, going about 550 miles an hour or so, and my engine quit. And I tried to get it restarted. It climbed away from the ground. It wasn't going to restart. Eventually reached the point where I had to pull the handle to be able to get out of the airplane before I impacted into the mountains that I was headed towards. So it was all in all a pretty neat experience. I wouldn't want to do it again, but yeah, it was interesting for sure.
So why don't you tell, you're a best-selling author, and your book is Discovering Your Authentic Truth. And I was sort of like, basically in your bio, you said this about getting to the core center of a person and then building from there, correct?
Yeah, so this is what the book looks like. It's an Amazon bestseller. You can just find it on Amazon. You can find it either through my name or by the title. But it is a book on communication. But really, what going back to what you were just saying, what I really believe it is a book I'm reconnecting with yourself. And the kind of the basic theme of it is that we're born in love, right? I'm a very spiritual, God loving person. I am a born again Christian. I'm very strong in my faith. But the book is for anybody. But I just believe that when we are born, we're born in love, the happy baby, right? And then inputs come in as the mind is maturing, as it's growing. I'm reading another book right now. It's called Behave. It's an absolutely phenomenal book. It's like 770 pages long or something. But talking about the development of the mind in the early years, and that's what we study a lot and with what I do. And what happens is during those formidable years, especially 0 to 3, and then again 0 to 7, but really in those first few years is the first time we ever experience anger, sadness, fear, guilt, and shame. And that gets programmed into our mind. And when those things start happening, we find ourselves getting disconnected from that self-love of who we really love. Shame is a big one. Guilt is another one, right? The parents are fighting and the kids think it's their fault. Well, that's disconnecting them from their true core authentic self. And then we carry that with us. A lot of it's suppressed. We're not even aware of it. But the thing about the subconscious mind is it never forgets anything. It remembers everything, and not consciously, but subconsciously, it's there, and it can be recalled if it's required. But all that imprint, all that programming guides our life, whether we're aware of it or not. And so the book is to bring awareness to all this. And then in NLP, neuro linguistics programming, what we can do is we can go back in and rewire the brain from that early on programming. And so that's, it's kind of an overview of all that. I share some stories of people that I've worked with that have had remarkable changes in their life, if you will. One girl was 16 years old, tried to commit suicide. She was a cutter for years. She had been seeing psychiatrists and psychologists. They've been giving her medications. Everything was just making it worse because traditional, and I'm not putting it down, but this is what it is. Traditional psychiatry and psychology has a person relive the experience over and over and over again in their treatment. And for me, I don't care about the past other than to understand how they arrived at the decision to try to kill themselves. That's what's important to me. And I just need to elicit enough information because what I'm really getting at is their thought process, their decision process. And what's driving that decision process goes back to their behaviors and then all the way back to this early on programming, which we call the core values, which is what runs our lives. So once we can uncover all that through NLP, then we can go in and reprogram.
Right.
So
I just, I think people hear about NLP. I mean, people say I'm doing NLP or I know about NLP, but could you go a little deeper about like how you because I was always under the impression that NLP was basically designed to get rid of phobias. I mean, if you had a fear of spiders, then you would go to the NLP teacher, and within 10 minutes you could have a spider crawling up your arm, and
absolutely.
I mean, that's like the popular conception of NLP, but I'm sure it goes deeper, and it basically tries to create a holistic approach to happiness, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I have a whole chapter on happiness in my book because it is so central. Most people that are unhappy don't know what happiness even is. And in my opinion, I define joy and happiness as two different things. And when I wrote the book, I had never seen anyone else talk about it in that way. Since I know Osho has mentioned a couple things. He's a famous philosopher. And I've also seen, I think Eckhart Tolle has also written a little bit about this. But my philosophy is that joy is the inner peace, that inner self-love, and happiness is what you attract into your life. And you cannot attract the happiness and true happiness into your life unless you first have that inner joy. Right. So when you find that inner joy and that inner peace, now you're in love with life, and life responds in kind. But it's funny you bring up the spider example, because I have a good friend out in Washington State, and she is a Reiki specialist. And we were walking through a park one day when I was there on an overnight, and I shared with her, we were talking about phobias, and she somehow spiders came up, and she's like, "Oh my God, I can't even look at a spider." I said, "What if we could wipe that out in the next 10 to 15 minutes?" And she's like, "If you can do that, I will be a believer of what you're doing." And without any scripts in front of me or anything, and I hadn't done it in a while, kind of went through it. And sure enough, within 10 minutes, she hasn't had any problems with spiders since. And that was probably 7-8 years ago. So right. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned spiders, but that is a very small part. But phobias in general, fear of flying, a phobia is a learned response. We are born with only two fears: the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling, according to the experts. And there's a lot more now that we're starting to learn. Epigenetics is huge, that you can literally go in and change your genes of your body. That's also been proven that if somebody has had a very significant emotional event, they can pass that down to their children. That's been proven now as well. So there's a lot more that we're discovering, but for the longest time, psychology has said that there's only two fears that we're born with, and that is the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. And all the other fears are learned fears. So a phobia of flying, a phobia of spiders, or going outside, being around people, all those types of things. That's a learned response that got programmed in at some point in a person's life. So if it was programmed in through NLP, you can go and reprogram it, right? If the specialist or the person that's working with the individual knows exactly what to do. And it's very, very effective. But it can also be used for things such as one of the more common exercises that we'll do, especially with a brand new person that we're introducing this all to, is what's called a new behavior generator. Let's say you have a trait. Dale, let's say you want to, become you have a poet that you really, really, truly admire in your life. So you want to model what this person, that poet, did or has done, so that you can become a better poet yourself. So we pick out a few attributes of what this a model of possibility is what we would call it, with a few attributes of this model of possibility that you would like to model, that you would like to take on as well, so you could become a better poet. And then through a very short exercise, about 5-7 minutes, we mold the mind to believe and wire the brain to take on those traits. So that's another one. That's a relatively simple exercise to do, and it's very effective.
Well, this turns traditional therapy and psychotherapy on its head, because instead of having to go to a doctor for 15 years to get your traumas out, basically you're trying to do it in 15 minutes, correct?
Exactly. And here's the thing. Through the person that I learned all this through, there's also another student. She has her doctor in psychology. I got to make sure it's not psychiatry. I'm pretty sure she's a doctor in psychology. And I've asked her, I said, well, we get real results. You cannot deny the results that we get. For instance, this 16-year-old girl that after one session with me has never even thought about trying to commit suicide again, right? She's now like 22 or 23 years old. So, it's like 6-7 years. You cannot deny the success that NLP can bring. So why doesn't the psychology world accept it? And they don't, and they won't, because in their minds, it cannot be on a repetitive, proven thing the way that they want to prove it. And it's really a shame, because I think personally I mean, I don't represent anybody, so I can say this. I personally think a lot of people are suffering for reasons that they don't have to, because they're seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying there are alternative methods out there that if a person is truly suffering and looking for changes and they've been seeing a psychiatrist for 2 or 3 years, there's something wrong, right? Just like you're saying. I mean, 15 years, forget it. I mean, if you can't go to a psychiatrist or psychologist and within 4 or 5 sessions be resolved of the issue that's troubling you, when we know there are techniques like that out there to be able to do that, then there's something wrong with the system.
Right. Well, in my own case, I had the same doctor for 22 years before he died. I was in a program for 5 years with him, and he was like a classic Freudian psychiatrist. And the, you know, I think of Dr. Bill Pettit, who actually introduced me to the book Behave. He had a course, and he says he likes to quote that Woody Allen line about in Sleeper, where Woody Allen wakes up after 25 years, and he says, 25 years, I could have been halfway through with my analysis.
Well, and here's the thing too. I mean, what I'm referring to is a healthy individual that it finds himself in a mental situation that they don't know how to handle. Like, for instance, the lady who constantly falls into bad relationships. She wants that loving husband or the loving boyfriend, but somehow she meets them, and then within a few months they're abusive, and then they get out of that relationship, and they're so happy for them, and 6 months later they end up in another abusive relationship. Another year they're in another abusive relationship. Well, if there's a repetitive pattern there, right, it ain't the other person, it's that individual, it's that lady that's got something going on that's attracting that into her life. Now, when you start getting into more deeper things like schizophrenia, other chemical imbalances in the brain, well, then that's a whole another realm. Right. Schizophrenia, mild types of schizophrenia, or the way we talk about it in NLP is talking about it. We talk about a person in parts. Part of me wants this, part of me wants that. And if you like, so let's say part of me wants success, part of me wants to be a millionaire, but part of me wants to be a couch potato. Well, those two don't align, right? You ain't going to be a couch potato millionaire unless you made your millions first, right? So you got to have that determination. You got to have that tenacity, that continuous fight if you want to go out and make millions and millions and millions upon dollars. I was just speaking with this lady today that she's an investor. She's making $3 million per month, right, as an investor. Well, you're not going to do that sitting on the couch. So if part of you wants this and part of you wants that, then what we can do, there's exercises to try to meld that and figure out which part is even stronger. But, the desirable part wins out. And then that person can go on and have the fortitude of going there. Schizophrenia is an extreme parts, right? And then you can have multiple personalities in there. So you got multiple parts that are going on. And that's a little bit more detailed. So,
well, yeah. In my own case, I used to argue with my doctor about whether I was multiple or schizophrenic, and he'd always say you're schizophrenic. And my sister, who's a therapist and has like 4 or 5 multiple clients, she says, I'd say, well, I have to be a schizophrenic because, I'm aware of all my personalities. And she said, well, you're just a conscious multiple then. So that put me back at square one, But basically, what I advocate in helping the families is to become comfortable with the different people that your loved one has become, and to try to integrate those shattered. Schizophrenia means shattered minds. So to reintegrate and to recover the sense of self that's necessary in order to be a functional person.
Yeah. So that's very true.
But it's just like, I know schizophrenia isn't going to be like easily resolved by NLP. But you made a good point, is that basically NLP deals with healthy people who are having mental problems rather than people with a mental illness that are dealing with conflicts that are beyond. I mean, would you say that, or is there conflicts beyond the power of NLP to solve?
Well, Richard Bandler, who is one of the founders of neurolinguistics programming, along with Grinder, he'd probably say everything could be taken care of through NLP, but he is a master at it. I don't know. I can't answer that for you. The people that I work with and have worked with are people that, first of all, you have to have the desire to want to change. You have to desire to want to be better, and you have to be ready and willing. And if those two conditions are met, then there is a great possibility that, yes, we can have really tremendous results. Now, if a person is in a state of denial, like maybe it's a narcissistic husband, and the wife comes to me, hey, can you work with my husband? Well, no, I can't, because more chances than not, he doesn't see himself as a narcissistic, right? So he's not ready and willing to change. Now, if they get to the point where they go to therapy and he's being made aware of it, and he's like, man, I can't believe I'm behaving this way, I really want to change, this is what I'm looking for, then there's great hope. Yes, absolutely. So it's very dependent on the individual, but they got to have the desire, and they've got to be ready and willing for NLP to work.
Well, that's the catch-22 of schizophrenia, of serious mental illness in the first place. Is that have you ever heard of the term agnosognosia?
Not offhand.
Well, agnosognosia is like a symptom. There's a book called "I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need You and I Don't Want Help" by Dr. Javier Amador, and he really explores this idea of agnosognosia, which is a term taken from neurology that deals with stroke victims. But basically, I mean, it's not denial, because denial is sort of like a defense mechanism, whereas agnosognosia is like the inability to comprehend that you're sick, and therefore you don't think you need any help. And it's like one of the biggest obstacles to people wanting to change and getting help, because they just simply don't understand, they can't comprehend that there's something wrong with them, even though,
right,
99% of the people around them are saying, you need help. And it's just like a self-perpetrating cycle, where the more people tell people that they're sick, the more they get adamant that they aren't.
Yep. Very true.
So I think self-awareness is like, I mean, in my own case, it took me 9-10 years before I figured out, and like a traumatic vision within myself, to figure out that I wasn't God. And it was just like, and that was like really the start of my true self-awareness, even though, I had been in therapy for 10 years, and, I thought I was pretty self-aware, but, when I had that vision of the world exploding, it was like, how could I have been so sick to think that I was God? It's like, and that caused, of course, guilt and shame, and and I that's when the importance of Christ and faith came to the forefront, because it was like, please Jesus, forgive me for thinking I was God. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, and the challenge is, just like you described it, Dale, is that when a person's in that state, that's when I was talking about maps of the world, that's exactly the challenge, right? So a person's in their map of the world, they believe in something so strongly. Again, let me go back, because I don't want to go into great detail in your situation, but let's go back to the lady that's constantly finding herself into an abusive relationship. And when they're in that abusive relationship, the person's saying, well, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just get out of it? The person that's the alcoholic, right? The family member's like, why don't you just stop drinking? Well, if it was that easy, we wouldn't have a whole bunch of alcoholics running around, right? I had a good friend that died from being an alcoholic. I mean, I worked with her before I knew anything about NLP. And it's terrible. It's a dreadful disease, right? But when a person's in that state, they're in their own world. They can't see what the observer looking in can see. And to
Right.
get them to step out of that frame, the frame of their map of the world, is the very first step towards changing for the transformational, whatever you're trying to transform, to work. So we have to get them to step outside that frame and see their world as an observer versus being within the frame. And that sounds like what you're able to do, to be able to step out of the old frame and into a new world, to be able to see yourself from a different perspective, an all new perspective. And that's wonderful. So whoever you were working with to be able to do that that's fantastic.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, Guy, because ultimately, what happened was my brain blew up, and I did become a different person. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
literally became I'd been Dale for 30 years, and then I became Dewey. Dale, who thought he was God for 30 years, and then Dewey, who thought he was an android for the next 30 years. But I just like had to. I feel that I called that day the death of Dale, and Dewey like showed up 9 months later, and basically took over my body. But that feeling of getting out of myself and saying, I need a perspective on Dale, but you're so close to it that you can't get a perspective, and it's something
Yes.
dramatic, like seeing the world explode in your head, that like really opened my eyes to like really not only how sick I'd been, but also the possibilities of living without Dale.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Yep.
So uh, we've gotten into this pretty heavily, but why don't you tell me about your mentorship with is it Nyurka?
With
And
Nirka, yeah, Nirka. It's a Russian name. She comes from Puerto Rico. It's just she's Cuban, but or she comes from Cuba. She's Cuban. Sorry, I don't know how I got that mixed up. Anyhow, she I had first met her through my network marketing many years ago. I had met her at a seminar. She was one of the guest speakers, and she really struck me as somebody very unique. And I bought her CD set, or DVD set, which turns out she had just put together for that seminar. I've learned all that now, but anyhow, and I watched it with intensity because it was somebody that I really related to. I could feel her and the emotion and the love that she brought to this work that she was heavily involved in, and I could tell she was a master. And so skip forward about 8 years from there, I had left the military. I was flying for Southwest, and I was feeling a little lost. What it turned out to be, long story short, and I can do in a condensed version, is that as a fighter pilot, it's not what I did, it's who I was. And it became my identity. In fact, when people say, "What do you do?" I would say, "I'm a fighter pilot. It's not what I do, it's who I am." And so when I left that world
right,
after 20 years of it, and that was a great thing because it kept me alive. And where I have more friends and fingers and toes that, perished flying the F-16. I mean, that attitude kept me alive, but now it was no longer serving me, right? And so I was feeling lost. And here I am driving a bus, doing something that isn't nowhere near as challenging. I mean, you make it challenging, but it's nowhere near as challenging as being a fighter pilot. And so I was just feeling a little lost. And I was a very avid reader and personal growth. I even went and saw a psychotherapist trying to help find myself again. And Nurka was having a seminar in Los Angeles. And I told my wife, I said, I want to go to this. And by the lunch break, I had signed her and I up for one of her classes, very expensive at that time. She's come way down on prices, but that time is, I don't know, like $3,500, $4,000 a piece for a one few days only. It's only it was 4 days long up in Sedona. And we went there and I had an absolute life riveting transformation, and it changed my life forever. And I explain all that again, in my book as well, Discovering Your Authentic Truth, I go into great detail who Nirka is and how she made such an impact in my life as well. So that really, then what I started doing is I started following her. I took all her classes, spent I don't know, a lot of money taking all her classes. I eventually got my master's with her in NLP. And then I was also a facilitator for her. So I would attend her different seminars and different classes, and I would work with the students. And I found that I was very good with it. And then I had people reaching out to me on Facebook, with certain situations going on. For instance, this girl had tried to commit suicide, and I was having tremendous success with that as well. And I had always wanted to write a book. Now I had material to write a book on. And that's basically how the book came to be. Yeah.
I
So
find it
Nirka is
very
a big influence for me. And in fact, now, just by happen chance, that was not planned at all. We moved up here to Keystone, Colorado. She moved to Evergreen, which is about less than an hour away. So we're actually live fairly close now.
right.
It's pretty wild.
I want to talk about what you said. I think this is very significant. Is that you felt you didn't do fighter pilot. You were a fighter pilot, and I think that's what happens with a lot of seriously mental ill people. Is I mean I know this is true for myself, but you become identified with the illness rather than be identified with the self. And so instead of and this is something I'm still working on, but instead of saying I am a schizophrenic, I say I am a person who has schizophrenia. So it's the I am versus the I have. And I think that's like it.
Anything you say, Dale, anything you say after the words I am is a directive to your subconscious mind. If you say,
Right.
I am a millionaire, I am a very successful, highly successful businessman or highly successful copy salesman, I don't know, whatever it may be, a poet, an author, I am, whatever you say after that, the subconscious mind has several prime directives. And one of it is to carry out the orders you give it. And when you say I am, and that's one of the things I understand, and I'm just curious more than anything else. If you've ever been to an AA meeting, an Alcoholic Anonymous meeting, of course, everybody stands up and they say their name and they say, I am an alcoholic. So they're re-identifying as an alcoholic. I think the reason why they do it and the success that they have with it is because it's keeping it in the awareness. Hey, I'm an alcoholic. You better stick and stay away from that drink, no matter how bad you want it. And I think that is kind of the philosophy behind the way they do it. But I totally agree with you, because I have heard you say that several times in our conversations, that I'm a schizophrenic. And you're right. I am a person that has these tendencies, but it's not who I am.
Right.
Because who you are is that person that was born in love. That's who you truly are. I am love.
Well, I on my 66th birthday last May 24th, I woke up and I said, I'm going to put the labels, the stigma, and the bad programming behind me. And that's really what I've done. And, it's been very successful. I came across this financial planning company, and, I've been writing poetry. I'm in the longest relationship of my life. And, and it was just like making that decision. I'm not going to say I am a schizophrenic. I'm going to say I am a healthy human being who used to have schizophrenia.
Yes. Anything that was beautiful, right? I am a healthy, happy individual that gets the most out of life. And this is what I had at one point. In fact, just take the whole schizophrenia completely out unless you're using it in the context of helping other people. Just forget about it, because it's not who you are. And it's certainly not who you are today.
Well, it was just like drummed in. I tell a story often. I don't want to bore the audience or with you, but basically, when I was first hospitalized, I would say to my doctor, why am I in here? There's nothing wrong with me, which is classic agnosia. But also, he would say, well, if you broke your leg, you come into the hospital, right, Dale? And say, right, and he'd say, well, you broke your brain, and that was like the most terrible thing any person could ever. I mean, especially in a position of being a doctor, and that's like the most terrible thing that anybody can say to you, because when it sort of implies that once your brain is broken, you're never going to be able to fix it, and
Well,
you know
you mend a broken bone,
right,
right?
but
And there is a dogma, a stigma. I mean, there's a very famous psychologist, and I mentioned him in my book. I can't remember his name offhand, or I can't remember the name of his book, but he says in that if you get a cold or the flu, or you get physically ill, you break a bone, whatever it is, we don't think twice about going to the doctor for help. But when it comes to a mental challenge, we do. And there's a dogma against going to psychologists. Oh, you're seeing a shrink, right? And that is totally wrong. That dogma needs to be completely removed. And people need to know that if they're in a state of depression, they're in a state of anxiety, they're in a state of schizophrenia, whatever it may be, their mental challenge, that they should be able to go to a doctor for help without any kind of stigma or dogma attached to it, in my opinion. It's terrible the way we look upon it, because it's a sign of quote unquote weakness, is how people look at, oh, you had to see a shrink. Well, I didn't have to see a shrink. I worked my way out of it. Oh, did you?
Well, this gets to the very heart of the mental health warriors, actually, Guy, because our motto is, stop the stigma. But
Yeah.
I've been like talking about this for a while, but the stigma. I mean, there's the social stigma in that, every mass shooter, first thing they say is, well, he didn't have a history of mental illness, and just like this assumption that a person can't be filled with hate just without being psychotic. And then the other thing is that the self stigma, I think, is the most damaging and the most difficult to overcome. When my doctor said I had a broken brain, I carried that with me for 35 years. And it's like,
Wow.
and just that self stigma and the guilt and the shame that you feel if you're mentally ill, that's a result of social judgment. Just like you blame yourself for something that's beyond your control. And it's
And
like,
think about, go ahead.
no, go on.
I was going to say, and think about this. The doctor, in saying that to you, no intention inflicting the wound that he did with you, right? I mean, in his mind, it was just his way of helping you to understand that it's okay for you to be here,
Right.
to seek help, and that we can help you. But there you go again with the two individual maps of the world. What the doctor said and how it was received were two completely different. With how it was said and transmitted from one map of the world, and how it was received and interpreted with another map of the world, was a complete disconnect. And in the sad part of it, it left you wounded for 30-something years, 35 years. And that's a real shame.
Well,
And it's, so, for instance, this is a great example. If you don't mind, I'm just going on with this thought. So, for instance, this is a very, very classic case where NLP could wipe that out within a couple hours of working with you. And nothing to do with the schizophrenia, but to do with how that landed in your map. Because that made an imprint, a lasting imprint, a deep emotional impacted imprint in your mind. That's where NLP can really shine. So there's a rhyme. So there's where we can go in, the subconscious mind, understand that from a different perspective, from a different map, if you will, and rewire that so all that guilt and that shame from that comment is wiped out clean.
Well, it sounds very promising. I mean, basically, I've had to work it out myself over the years, but it was just like constantly reinforced. I mean, that first comment I think was basically an innocent comment, and as you say, it was just trying to make me understand why
how many
needed
times do parents do that to their kids?
Right. Why
for
are you
the rest of their life, and they don't even know, they don't even remember the event.
Right. Why are you so stupid? Why can't you get great straight A's? Like Billy down the street. And it's just like. But I find the idea of maps very interesting. I think that's like a very enlightening concept because I mean my doctor's map was I'm trying to help you and this will help you understand your illness. But I being an agnosignosia just like took it. My brain's broken and it's going to always be broken and there's nothing I can do to heal it. Whereas, when you break a leg, they say the leg uh, comes back stronger. And I think that's
That's
what happened
right.
to me. My broken brain came back stronger because I fixed it.
Yeah. And using your example of the child, oh, you're stupid, oh, you're never going to amount to anything. You can't do that. You can't have that. But what does that child start to do? I am stupid. And then there's an identity being developed. Or the class clown, right? And they're always like, oh, he always makes people laugh. I always make people laugh. Well, I'm a fool, right? I'm and they take on that identity, and it truly becomes their identity. I'm a fighter pilot, right? But when it's done at an early age, as a child, especially before 7 years old, but and really 4 years and under, you have no filters for your subconscious mind to protect that subconscious mind. There's no filters. It's all direct input because the way the brain works and the brain waves and all that stuff. So when a kid is told or a child is told that they're stupid, they believe it because there's no filter to tell them otherwise.
And it's also
Whereas as an adult, and somebody tells me, "Oh, Guy, you're stupid. You're doing that network marketing thing. That's just one of those blah 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 blah." Well, I've got the filter. I know a lot more than they do, obviously, about the industry, and I've got a filter to say, oh, "You're the one that's got an issue because you're not open to listening to what I have to share with you of over 20 years of experience." But a child doesn't have that filter, and that's why these imprints, these lasting imprints that start building our identity, start factoring in. And again, that's why I wrote this book, to let people know that there's a way to help you get back to your true, authentic self. Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, Guy. But I just wanted to add a point to that is that, and the effect is reinforced because if a child depends on his parents for life itself, and if an authority figure of that power like tells someone that they're stupid, then it's going to have even more of an impact on the subconscious.
Yep. Exactly.
So, okay, well, we just have 2 minutes left, Guy, but thank you very much. Any parting thoughts or any ideas that came up for you today that you want to just wrap up with us?
Well, I'd like to piggyback on what Warrior Queen said here is that I'm really impressed with you, Dale. I think it was a wonderful time spent with you, getting to know you over the last couple of weeks. And I think what you're doing here with the Mental Health Warriors is a wonderful thing. And I hope more and more people will tune into you guys and seek the help that they know, that we all know is available to them. The challenge is a lot of people don't know where to go and find it. And then you get into the whole insurance thing, and most NLP practitioners. So what I would recommend is finding a psychologist or psychiatrist that is also certified in NLP. I can't emphasize that enough. I would never ever myself personally go to a psychiatrist or send my daughter or my wife to a psychiatrist or psychiatrist that was not NLP certified from a very, very good school. It's just so important because they have a depth of understanding that is not taught in the university.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a great pleasure, Guy, and I hope you've gotten as much out of it as I have because it's been extremely enlightening. And thank you very much. And uh, I guess so. How do people get in touch with you, Guy?
Oh, it's very simple. It's my first and last name, Guy Brilando. Email is guybrilando@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I'm also on Facebook, Guy Brilando. I have YouTube channels, all that good stuff. But yeah, guybrilando@gmail.com. And I also have a GuyBrilando.com is my personal website, which I'll also talk about a lot about the book and that. And you can see the reviews. The reviews are through the roof. So,
well, congratulations on all your success, and thank you for all you do, and thank you for your caring and your service, and have a great night.
All right. Thank you, Dale. A wonderful day to all.